Puka Nacua is on pace for 212 catches this season. The Cowboys defense has as many sacks as they have points allowed, and the Chargers are the only team in NFL history to score 50 points and have no turnovers through 2 games and still be winless. Welcome to week 2, EJ. How was your Sunday?
Better than the Chargers Sunday? No, I had a fine Sunday. And, I think many NFL teams had a fine Sunday. And we did see the return to form from some of the teams that we thought would be good this year, a beginning of the righting the ship, if you want to. And that was good. But then there were other teams, and we'll talk about them too, who kind of stayed on the bad foot.
It's kind of a tough swing in week 2 because this is where if you take a loss in week 1, everybody's like, okay, it's fine. We'll come back. We'll even this thing up. But your playoff odds go significantly down if you start 0-2 compared to 1-1. Like in terms of overall decline in odds, it is the most impactful week. And it's a tough hole to dig yourself out of, especially in the AFC. And there are some teams in the AFC that we thought were going to be very good that have started out 0-2. Namely, our first game we're going to go over, Ravens at Bengals. The Bengals are still looking for their first win after 2 games. The Ravens, conversely, are now 2-0 and have looked mostly convincing while being 2-0, while being extraordinarily injured. This team, given the circumstances, is about as real as it gets. Meanwhile, the Bengals, quite frankly, I'm still struggling to figure them out. What was your early impression of that game on your first viewing?
First viewing was Lamar Jackson still got that magic in him. Like, that was the viewing during the game. Well, there's probably 5 plays in that game where I looked up and went, oh, yeah, only he can do that. Like, we just sort of write it off, but we shouldn't, because it is magical and it is elite. And when he's on the field and healthy, he's an absolute difference maker. He still is, whether it's running the ball, we obviously know about that. Flipping the ball in short yardage situations where he just eludes pressure and then goes, here, take this, and picks up a first down. Other quarterbacks can do that, but when you look at the sum total of that work, there are very few quarterbacks that can do all of the things the way that he does them. In fact, maybe no quarterbacks that can do all of the things the way he does them. Ravens seem to return to form. Monken seems to be adjusting well. I like that as an offensive coordinator. Lou Anarumo's defense, no easy task on any given week. Bengals shifted offensively. They, went out with Jamar and said, he's going to lead us. Ravens said, nuh-uh. And they found some other ways. And that's good. That's a good sign. They have plenty of other weapons, and they did end up using them. And look, this was a typical weekly AFC North alley fight. Like, it's 2 teams taking each other out back and beating the living hell out of each other. It was a really close game. Ravens came out on top.
You mentioned them clearly wanting to feature Jamar Chase in this game and not really being able to. And when I went back and I was going through the all-22 last night because I knew we were going to talk about this game, I want to give a hand to Brandon Stevens and Ronald Darby and Rock Ya-Sin, who, again, this Ravens secondary was banged up. And when we previewed this game, we're like, I don't think they're going to be able to play a lot of man coverage against these receivers the same way that the Browns did. And they didn't. Like, they still didn't play a lot of man coverage, but when they were in quarters and Chase was isolated backside, like, that backside corner is in man coverage. Like, man is a component to match quarters against trips looks because the backside's going to be one-on-one. And since he was doing that on purpose, they were isolating Chase backside on purpose to basically say, we know you're not going to play cover 1, but let's see if we can still force you into a man look backside. And all those guys held up. All of them held up. They did give him significant help throughout the game too. Like, we saw a lot of cover 2 in different ways. We saw them roll into it. We saw them, show pressure and then back out. We saw them call 2 invert in some pretty fun ways. We saw them, start out with 3 safeties over the top, and one of them being Hamilton, and then kind of like dropping into it rather than expanding out to it. Like they did a lot of different ways to keep a safety over Jamar, but in the instances where they just had to put up or shut up, their corners did a really fantastic job. And speaking of quarters, when they were in the red zone, they got a really, really nifty interception on Burrow in the red zone where the backside safety, like there was like a switch release front side again against trips, and Chase was isolated backside. And I think Joe thought, oh, they're going to bracket Chase in the red zone inside outside. They didn't do that. And the safety like held his water for so long before he came over to poach the number 3. And Joe just, I don't think Joe believed that he was going to come over because of how late, quote unquote, late he was to then go over and poach number 3 vertical. And you could see like how stunned Burrow was when that got picked. He's like, where the fuck did you come from? And so I think the Ravens secondary, down a lot of guys, played exceptionally well. The Ravens defensive front, again, with a lot of these cover 2 looks, they were asked to stop the run down a body, and they did it. Travis Jones absolutely killed him. Urban killed him. The interior offensive line for the Bengals could not get any movement off of double teams. And so I think that the entire Ravens defense absolutely came to play, even though they weren't fully healthy. And by the way, on the flip side of that, Frank Pollock's got to do some deep introspection, because for them to consistently call inside zone and duo over and over and over again, which did work for them last year. We talked about that in the offseason series, right? Like they became very much like reliant on duo and inside zone. They called it over and over and over in this game, and they couldn't generate movement on those double teams. They were not moving Travis Jones. They were not moving Pierce. They were not moving Urban, and they never went away from it ever. Like they didn't call power. They didn't call counter. They didn't do anything to try to like artificially manufacture a seam. It was just, we're going to run you over. But they couldn't run him over. And so like Pollock's resistance to trying literally anything else in the run game was also a massive, massive detriment to this Bengals offense. And the Ravens outrushed them 178-66, I think was the number, as a result. Like they couldn't get anything going. There was no balance. So you're putting it all on Joe. You're putting it all on these receivers. And again, when the Ravens secondary is playing as well as it did, I don't know. It was just a really shitty game plan on the part of the Bengals, on top of not great execution, on top of a great game plan and execution from the Ravens. And all that added up to the Ravens winning. I'm curious to see what the rematch looks like, because there's a lot of tape that I think the Bengals are watching this morning and saying like, God, why did we do that?
Feels like you said you were looking for their identity earlier, and they are too. Feels like one of those teams the Bengals do this year that might take till week 5 or 6 and then have to make a late season push to get whatever they're going to get, and play extremely well with a very thin margin for error. And yesterday, their pivot from the run game was more of the same run game or the pass game. They never pivoted to some sort of different approach in the run. Their pivot was, well, the run's not working well, so we'll go back to the pass. And the Ravens wanted that clearly by their defensive game plan. They were ready for that. And that didn't really work either. And that snuffed out what is a very powerful offense, because they were unwilling to adapt. And we see teams over and over again that are unwilling to adapt to their personnel or to what the other team's doing. If, everybody comes out with a plan, then you all get punched in the mouth. Then what do you do? And when they got punched in the mouth, they were like, well, I think we should push our jaw back in there again, see if we could take another shot. And it didn't work out for them. The rematch, hopefully for them, looks very different. It's going to need to, because the Ravens are also going to continue to evolve. Monken's shown that just within a couple of weeks. We saw Zay as the chunk getter on offense for the Ravens, which was pretty cool. He was not the focus. He certainly didn't have the most targets, but he had, 15.5 yards per for 4 catches. The TDs went to Aguilar and Andrews, which is not unfamiliar territory for the Ravens. But Zay was the guy that was giving them the chunk plays that they didn't have. And we're going to talk about another team down the board here that didn't have chunk plays vertically last year, really needed them, went out and got a rookie receiver, and that receiver is filling that need for them as well. So that was kind of a mini theme for Sunday.
Yeah, every week I think the general theme is, oh, Zay's becoming the wide receiver one faster than we thought he would. And as much as we believe that last week, I believe it even more this week. Like it's interesting if you go back to my thoughts 2 weeks ago when people were asking like who's going to lead the Ravens in receiving yards this year, and I was like, I mean, probably Odell, maybe Bateman. Like I love Zay as their number 3, but there's other guys there, and Zay might not take over as number 1 for a year or two. Yeah, it's kind of going out the window. I kind of feel like Zay might lead them in everything this year because he, as great as we thought he was, he's been even better as a pro, and that says a lot because we were obsessed with him pre-draft. But
what's
Zay
really
Flowers
important is how much Lamar thinks of him.
Yes,
and you can tell exactly how much Lamar thinks of him by the big ball he hit down the seam when Zay was covered. We're just going to call it covered. I was going to say NFL open. He wasn't. And there was safety help coming over on that ball. Now, Lamar has a big arm, and he got it there right before the safety, but the corner was in phase. He was on Zay. That ball was not like, oh, it's a break. He got him. He's got it. You know, he's even. He's leaving. No, it was even all the way up to the time the ball arrived right before the safety got there. That's basically, if he doesn't hit that, we're going to call that a throw into double coverage.
Yeah.
Which it really wasn't, but that was a trust throw. And in week 2, Zay's the guy he picks to do that. He let that ball go cleanly. It was not like, oh, it's a heave. Like he was looking at him and he went, nope, I like that. And he cut it loose and Zay paid it off. That sort of speaks volumes to where the Ravens pass game is going to go from here. If they're already doing that, look out for what comes next.
Going forward, overall theme for me, the Ravens are still a great team. They just have to get healthy. But they've survived those injuries as well as they possibly could early on. Once they do become a fully armed and operational battle station again, look out. They can beat anybody. And then on the Bengals side, we're getting close to come to Jesus meeting territory here in that locker room. The play calling has been suspect. The execution's been suspect. I know Joe's working through some medical stuff, but it just hasn't been good. And so unfortunately for them, they have to work through all these issues while digging out of a 2-game hole in the division, which could be a 2-game hole to 2 separate teams that have now beat them in the first 2 weeks. If the Browns win tonight, keep in mind, we're recording this well before Monday Night Football kicks off. So tough sledding, but if anybody could do it, Joe Burrow can come back from this. We'll see. Moving on to our second game, Seahawks at Lions, another game that we previewed going into the week, expecting it to be a really good one. Shocker, it was a really good one. The one thing that surprised me the most about it was, again, Geno was going into this game down both starting offensive tackles, and the Seahawks were dubbed the "What are you?" team from week 1, where we couldn't. It's like, how good are you or how bad are you? You know, you're getting spanked by the Rams and convincingly spanked by the Rams. We're like, did we just misevaluate you? Like, what's going on? What are you? And so we're looking to see if they could bounce back and recover from this while being down both offensive tackles. And Geno did. Geno looked fantastic. There was one really, really, really exceptionally dumb sack that he took late in the fourth quarter. But other than that, like, he got on that heater in the second half and led him to an overtime win. That was a extremely gutsy performance by him. And I think that's probably a tone-setting win for the rest of the year for the Seahawks of like, hey, we weren't supposed to win this game. Like, we really weren't. Again, we couldn't pass protect worth anything in week 1. We're down both our offensive tackles. We're on the road. The Lions are good. We are not supposed to win. And they won. That is a monumental win for Seattle. And dare I say, saved their season almost before it began.
I don't know that I'll go as far as save their season, but it is absolutely a return to form game for Geno, and he needed it badly. And this is what really good quarterbacks do. When we started calling Geno Smith a really good quarterback just straight up last season, good quarterbacks don't always have everything line up for them. They obviously don't have all their supporting cast. They don't necessarily have all the protection. They might not even have great play calling. They find a way to make it work. And Geno in week 1 did not find a way to make it work. It was ugly and he looked off. It looked like, oh, is this going to be a one-year wonder thing where Geno has an incredibly hot year? The organization kind of semi-hedges, but really plans on him being the guy in the short term, and then he doesn't pay that off. And he comes out with this performance in week 2, like you said, down both tackles on the road, no run game to speak of. Very first play to Kenneth Walker, they rip off a big chunk, and you think, okay, he's going to be able to lean on the run game today. That'll get him going. Basically nothing else for the rest of the game. Lions had the run game locked down. Zach Charbonnet got one later on, which looked really good. But other than that, it was 2 and 3 yards and a cloud of turf pellets. It was not pretty stuff. And Geno came out hot, sharp initially, had a little bit of a dip where I started to worry in the second quarter. And I thought, oh, is he going to revert to that week 1 form? And then second half, absolutely planed up, hit that stride, was on target, forced the issue, and again, did it by himself with very little protection, no run game. Leaned on that very talented wide receiving core. They all had big catches. Tyler Lockett, we got to talk about him again. So clutch, both the touchdowns in this one. He's been doing this for a decade now, folks. Put some respect on his name. He is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Showed it again yesterday. Not the fastest, not the biggest, doesn't matter. Makes catches with guys draped on him, gets open, runs good routes, does everything he needs to do. DK made an incredibly tough catch down by the goal line in the first half, took a shot in the kidneys from safety coming over, held on. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba came through with a couple of clutch catches for first downs, which is exactly the role we thought he was going to be playing early. And Geno hit him, to his credit. Again, you're right. They should not win this road game from a divisional opponent that is favored, thought to be a Super Bowl favorite, right? They came out with the win, and it is so much so on Geno. And that's a big deal for everybody in that locker room to kind of exhale and go, okay, cool. Leader's back. We can follow him.
I also want to give a shout out to Forsyth and Curhan, the 2 backup tackles that were in the game. Allowed 7 combined pressures between the 2 of them. Only 7. That's good. Again, backup tackles. That's good, right? There's tackles all around the league this week that allowed 7 by themselves, but no sacks and only 1 quarterback hit between the 2 of them. So, again, that was as good a performance as you could hope for to give Geno just enough time to make plays. Again, the pockets weren't amazing, but it was enough. It was enough. Side note on the other side, Jared Goff, still a good quarterback. There was the 1 pick 6 that was unfortunate. I couldn't quite tell what happened on it. It's like, did you just miss? Like, did you think that Gibbs was going to be settling in a different spot than he did? Like, it just kind of looked like Gibbs was breaking to space on an option route, and Goff threw it one way and Gibbs went the like. It was kind of a weird pick, but ended up being a pick 6. His first interception in a long time. But other than that, like Goff was throwing seeds in this game. Like, he looked really, really good. So this game does not shake my confidence in Detroit whatsoever. They just happened to run into another Seattle team that, when Geno's hot and his wide receivers are doing everything that they can do, he is arguably the best, receiving trio in the NFC. They're tough to beat. It's absolutely a tough Seattle team to beat. Almost makes the Rams win in week 1 even more impressive, to be honest, because this is what Seattle can do to you, right?
And they stomped them out. I mean, the Rams,
they did
won that game convincingly. I'm going to pile on Jared Goff and in a good way and say he is drilling it right now in Ben Johnson's offense. Like, he was drilling it at the end of last year, and he looks even more comfortable. Some of those throws in the first half, just rockets. And when Goff sees it and throws it like that, he's very tough to defend. That offense is very tough to defend. Over 300 yards, 3 TDs, receptions by 8 players. He's spreading it around. He looked confident. There's a lot of quarterbacks around the league this week that did not look confident. You didn't look at Jared Goff and see him rattled, out of phase, off stride, any of that. He looked in command and he was absolutely gunning it. Again, very hard to say that, he's the difference of them not winning this game. I don't think that's true at all because, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, like you get that performance out of your quarterback and you get a half decent run game, which they had with Montgomery. They, as per our prediction, went back to Montgomery as the grinding, physical, pounding run game to just beat up the middle of that defense. Seahawks held pretty well. It was only 62 yards, but Montgomery was in there 16-something carries, 14-something carries, banging away, doing his thing, making people work for it, getting them tired. And again, you look at this game, they probably should have won it at home, but it's fluky, and the margin of victory in the NFL is incredibly, incredibly thin.
Before the season, a lot of people in regards to Goff, and they were saying this as a compliment, but they were like, oh, late 2000s Matt Schaub is the level that he's at. And keep in mind, Matt Schaub led the league in passing one year, right? I watched late 2000s Matt Schaub. Goff is playing better. Like you put Jared Goff in that late 2000s Kubiak offense with like Andre Johnson and Owen Daniels and all that. Like this version of Goff would have outproduced that version of Matt Schaub. So adjust expectations for Jared Goff. Okay. He is no longer floating around the Dalton line. He is far, far, far above it. And that trade has worked out spectacularly well for the Lions so far. Moving to Dolphins Pats, Sunday Night Football that we watched last night. Really intriguing matchup that we, again, previewed going into this Sunday because we're like, okay, suffocating defense for super explosive offense. What's going to happen here? And the Pats defense held on as long as they could. They overall, considering the circumstances, they played as well as they could. They held down Tyreek Hill better than most defenses can hold down Tyreek Hill. Obviously, he got the touchdown, but they limited explosives from him. They doubled the absolute shit out of him like we thought they would. We knew that Jalen Waddle was going to get opportunities to do damage one-on-one, and he did. But even then, only allowing 80-something yards to Waddle is as good as you can hope for. Like they did a fantastic job considering the circumstances against arguably the best offense in the league. Tua was getting it out in less than 2 seconds on average time to throw in the second half, 1.9 seconds. Like you can't get sacks against that. You can't get pressure against that. And they still kept the Patriots offense in the game until the very last minute. That being said, the talent around Mac Jones continues to be an issue. The offensive line is extraordinarily banged up. I think they only had like one normal starting offensive lineman in the game, maybe 2 at most. But like you look at the injury report for the offensive line leading up to the game, it was 80% of the starters, right? Your number one receiver is Kendrick Bourne. You can't run the ball, so Ramondre's mainly just being effective as a receiver at this point. There's not a whole lot around Mac Jones. And for them to even be semi sort of competent on offense is a real achievement for Mac Jones. And they were semi sort of, maybe sort of kind of competent, right? But the talent around Mac just still isn't there. And my fear for the Patriots is that we're going to get a lot of games like that one where the defense keeps them in it when they shouldn't be in it. And then 2 weeks in a row, Mac is trying to put something together and no huddle, driving late in the game, and the offensive line breaks down and he's just getting shelled. I worry that we're going to see that 5 or 6 more times this year. And it's just going to be a heartbreaking year for Patriots fans that know they're close to being a really good team, but they're not quite there.
Mac put in a heroic effort yesterday, and he looked really sharp in certain places where he's good, where we knew he would be good pre-draft even, and he was good as a rookie. Obviously, we're sort of throwing last year out with the bathwater. He looked sharp again in those short to medium areas, and we knew the Fangio defense was going to do this to him, right? They were going to put the cap on, they were going to put the lid on, and they did scheme up some shots, but he's not as comfortable in those shot plays. You get over 20 yards, his accuracy expands. He'll take the shot. He'll be on time, but he doesn't necessarily throw a great deep ball. But in the short to medium stuff, again, without superior talent, he hit those guys on the sidelines, in stride, in crossers, on the hooks, on time. He was operating this offense really well, and he looks really comfortable in the no huddle. Like, this goes back to, I'm not comparing Mac to Tom Brady, but Tom Brady, when he would get in those no huddle situations and he knew he was dictating by keeping the defensive players on the field, Mac looks way more comfortable in the no huddle than he does even under center. And he's very good under center, but he just looks like he's commanding it and running it the way he wants to when the Patriots go to no huddle. And they pushed the Dolphins. They made him tired. And again, he was taking lots of chunk plays, but the Dolphins were doing that on purpose. They were making him take those plays, making 11 and 12 and 13 play drives to try and get a touchdown. And there just wasn't the explosive to help him out in the run game or in the pass game. They took a couple shots in the pass game. Run game never really got it going. So he was just doing all the work. He was just carrying all the water by himself. And he did a great job carrying the water, but that's not going to win you a ton of games. On the Patriots defensive side, look, if you've got Waddle and Hill and you keep them to 126 yards and a TD between two of them, you had a good day. Had a really good day. And I want to give a shout out to Christian Gonzalez and the importance of watching multiple angles of a play, because he got his pick this week. It was against Hill. And on the first angle, I thought I stepped in front of him, like, nice pick. On the second angle, which was more from the side, I got a much greater appreciation of what an athletic feat that was. So Christian Gonzalez is about a yard and a quarter off of him, little up the field and a little inside. He sort of stops running when he sees the ball come in and just jumps, like leaps. And from the first angle, it just wasn't the greatest angle. It looked like he just jumped up and caught it. And it was like, wow, okay, cool. You know, he's taller than Hill. I'm not going to say more athletic because that's kind of silly, but like, we know he's a good leaper, right? But it didn't look like that much. On the second version, you see that he not only jumps up to cover the distance, he jumps about 3/4 of a yard backwards as well. He basically just arcs his back over. It's probably something he got from his sister, who's a tremendous volleyball player. It looked like a tremendous volleyball player around the net, and just absolutely plated that thing right in the hands. That is a great defensive play. That is a rookie going against a seasoned and very quality NFL veteran. And you could see Hill, he's frustrated. He was like, that was mine. That was a whole bunch of chunky yards. What are you doing, Rook? He beat him up on the ground a little bit, but like, Gonzalez is just out playing like sandlot ball. He gets back there. He's like, nah, I got it.
Yeah.
And just up, backwards, arcs, and catches that perfect hands catch. Beautiful athletic play, and exactly the reason that the Patriots prioritized him so high in the draft.
And it's interesting because early in Gonzalez's college career, like, ball skills was the knock on him, right? And then his last year in college, I don't know what he did in the offseason, but his last year at college, he starts making these crazy ass picks. And then, you know, gets to the NFL and starts making these crazy ass picks. We're like, how did you learn to catch? And, you know, can you do that for Kadarius Toney? Like, where'd this come from?
Oh, man. The Christian Gonzalez school for kids that don't catch good.
And want to learn to do other stuff good, too. Dolphins offense, by the way, one of the few things that not few things, they did everything well, but one of the things that they did the best in this game was run the ball. And, you know, this Raheem Mostert had a vintage Raheem Mostert game, or are we able to say that at this point? He's been in the league long enough, right? Once you cross 30, we could say vintage Raheem Mostert, but, you know, where it's pounding and pounding and pounding, and then you finally hit that one crack and the 4-3 speed takes over. And that last touchdown run, honestly, is what kind of sealed the game. But it's kind of a misunderstanding of what Raheem Mostert is, to say that he's just a slasher, he's a speed back, he's a change of pace back. Like, no, like, this dude is a pounder that also happens to run 4-3. And I don't think people started appreciating that aspect to his game, the physicality to his game, until probably the last couple Buffalo games last year, where he was just running over Bills defenders, right? Like, he is a complete running back. He doesn't just burn angles. Like, he will run your ass over. And I'm really happy to see his success, honestly, because I think he went through it early in his career in terms of bouncing around the league and everything like that, and then he finally got a chance in a system that suits him, and now he's like comfortably the RB1 in Miami. Couldn't be happier for him. But I want to emphasize, like, this is a complete running back that can beat you in every single possible way, and as long as he stays healthy, even down offensive linemen, which Miami is not fully healthy on the offensive line right now, even down offensive linemen, Raheem Mostert will make that running game good.
We need to talk about how it happened too, because we talked about at the top of the show, the Bengals sort of intransigence to change. They ran it, and then they just didn't run anything else. Well, everybody and their brother comes into this game knowing that Miami is very dangerous on outside zone. And we say a Shanahan-based run game, outside zone, outside zone, outside zone. They run outside zone for most of the night. The two long Raheem Mostert runs, inside zone.
Mm-hmm.
McDaniel went against tendency, and all good coaches go against tendency, and he picked the right spot to do it. He flipped the lever at the right time. Patriots defenders were leaning outside zone. They went inside zone, and they gashed him. The first one, he ran through somebody. The second one, he just ran through the hole, and he still has that 4.3 speed. Yes, he's at 30. He apparently says that's an benefit because he didn't get a lot of mileage taken off his tires in the first 4 or 5 years you talked about, where he's bounced around a league looking to stick. Bears legend Raheem Mostert.
That's right. I forgot he was on the Bears.
Right. So did everybody else. He was on a lot of teams in the first 4 or 5 years of his career, and then again gets to a system, struggles with injury a little bit, but shows that potential, not just the speed, but that complete potential. And like you said, as long as he can stay on the field, he's going to continue to deliver for this run game. But you could see how happy he was on the sidelines. He was like, we got him. We got him. We set him up, and then we got him. And that is a perfect fusion of coach and player. Again, calling a very specific thing based on a week's worth of game planning to say, this is how we're going to play. Because again, McDaniel is setting people up. He's like, we know what they're going to do, so we're going to do this. We're going to move like this, then they're going to move like this, then we're going to do this to them. And they did it again last night with Mostert, and it was the difference in the game. That second long run was really the backbreaker that sealed it, because this game stayed close, late into the game.
Moving to our next game, Commanders-Broncos. We didn't talk about the Commanders last week, and we didn't talk about the Broncos last week. So if you're a Commanders and or Broncos fan, consider this your makeup, okay? Because that was a hell of an entertaining game. It was up and down, each team just trading body blows the entire time, had a few haymakers land as well, especially on the part of the Broncos. We had a rare actual completed Hail Mary that ended up not mattering at all because of an uncalled PI in the end zone of the 2-point conversion. If you're a Broncos fan, you're probably sick this morning because you're like, oh my God, we should have won. And maybe, possibly should have won. But at the same time, as a neutral fan, I can just appreciate that Broncos football game was fun to watch, which means they're moving in the right direction, EJ.
It was not hellish for once, and that was great. There was some movement. I had this game on yesterday along with all the other games, and I paid a fairly close eye to it because I'm very interested this year in how Sam Howell's going to do under Eric Bieniemy, and anybody that watched the offseason preview stuff knows that. But I had one impression of it yesterday, and then I rewatched this morning over coffee, and it was a very different game. There were things that I thought that were amplified, and then there are things that I thought that were wrong, which again is, a good call to rewatch things from multiple angles and see if you were really right about what you picked up during a very busy Sunday. What Sam Howell did yesterday in Denver is really impressive, like way more impressive on the rewatch. He was getting harassed. The Broncos pass rush was eating the Washington offensive line. Now, they did have a little bit more running game. We talked about Geno at the top, not having a running game to lean on and doing it all himself. Sam Howell still was able to play an effective game at quarterback and hit, speaking of seeds and Goff, like an absolute rip. Probably the best throw of the weekend was the touchdown he hit to McLaurin deep down the middle.
Yeah.
That thing was a rope.
It went 10 feet off the ground and just stayed there until it got
100
to
miles an
Terry's
hour,
hand.
10 feet off the ground. And it's an audacious throw. Like, it takes a bunch of audacity to even say, I think I can get this. And he not only thought he could get it, he got it in there for the touchdown, but he was constantly running for his life, getting hit, ended up showing his running ability, which we knew he had, but he was tough. He also did his best Kirk Cousin impersonation on a bunch of those throws and knew he was going to get a mouthful. He knew he was going to get smacked, and still stood in there and delivered dimes, like right on guys' mugs, and then got blasted, got up and did it again. He's a tough customer. He's got a hell of an arm. He's got running ability, and he did it all, again, in less than perfect conditions. The game call, in this case, Eric Bieniemy's game call helped him, but he was not getting the looks he expected because pressure was there in his face immediately from multiple defenders. He took a bunch of sacks, bunch of hits. He just kept plugging, and they end up winning the game at the end. Really impressive performance from Sam Howell and folks like Brian Robinson, who you're a huge fan of. Brian Robinson was the glue guy in this one. He had some tough rushing yards. He had some big receiving yards to keep him going early in the game. We know he's a very good blocker, so he was helping take some of those hits off Howell. He was a really important part of the Commanders' game plan. Probably won't get a ton of praise for this because his outright raw stats weren't great, but when you go back and look, oh man, there's Brian Robinson Jr. making another play.
Just grinding it out, keeping him on schedule. Had a couple explosives, but just not losing yards is important, right? Especially when you're trying to come back from 21-3. Like we just got to stay on schedule here and keep plugging away. And eventually they got there. On the Broncos side of things, particularly the offense, the story of the game that everybody was looking for going into this was when are we going to see the Sean Payton, Russell Wilson thing work, or are we going to see it work? And for the most part, it did. Kind of looking at last week, we were talking about how, it felt like every single drive in week one was like 4-yard throw, 5-yard throw, another 4-yard throw. Like everything was like 14 plays. It's like, can we get an explosive? Can we get a chunk? Can we score quickly here? And they did that this week. In fact, 65% of Wilson's passing yards and all 3 of his touchdowns came on just 4 of his 32 throws. So that quick game component was still there. The nauseatingly long drives in the name of efficiency were still there, but they actually hit the explosives this week. And that was the difference. That was why they were up 21-3 to begin with. That being said, Russ also took 7 sacks, and he was doing a lot of the stuff that we criticized Russ for during his last little bit in Seattle, of like holding the ball too long and just waiting, trying to make a play, trying to be a hero, trying to hit those explosives. But I still feel like there's a balance that he's been struggling to hit of when to take the shot and when to just get rid of it. And credit to the Commanders secondary. I would say 3, maybe you could argue 4 out of those 7 sacks were just because of how well the secondary was holding up down the field for most of this game. Like at least 3 of those were coverage sacks. Again, you could argue 4 of them were. And also credit to the defensive line for having the effort to just go chase Wilson down. But like he was holding on to the ball forever and kind of inviting half of those sacks to hit him in the first place, where it was like, dude, get rid of it. So I kind of have mixed feelings on this game, because on one hand, they hit the explosives we were looking for. On the other hand, they had a bunch of negative plays because he was trying to hit the explosives we were looking for. I feel like there's a more efficient way to hit these. Like the ball that he hit to Mims down the sideline, right? That's a quick throw, right? Because it's a go route down the boundary. It's one-on-one. You got Mims toasting Emmanuel Forbes. Absolutely toasting him, because it's Manuel Forbes. And that's a throw that doesn't take a super long time to develop. And he hit it. I want to see more of that. But, waiting for like the corner post where Russ is holding the ball for 5 seconds, like it's just not going to be there. So I would like to see Sean kind of adjust and maybe prioritize quicker hitting deep balls, just because I don't think they could pass protect well enough to do the other stuff. Also, calm down, Commanders fans. I know that Forbes got a pick but in typical Forbes fashion, which is what I was talking about pre-draft, where it was like, oh my God, he gets so many picks. Please watch the actual interception. It was a miscommunication with Sutton. Russell threw it to nowhere. There was nobody there but the corner. He was literally just, I think it was cover 2, and he was just playing the flat, and then Russ threw it right to him. So I get it. Good job. Had the hands, caught the ball, but let's calm the fuck down on the narrative that all Emmanuel Forbes does is get picks. All any corner would do is get picks if you throw it right to him. Anyway, that's
not any corner. We saw a lot of drop picks, so at least he caught it. But I understand that. And this game, again, on rewatch, I had a very different impression. When I was watching this, I felt like, oh, hey. And like you said at the top, this is what people are looking for. When's this Peyton-Russ marriage really going to take fire? When are we going to see it? And I looked up for some of the deep balls. I saw the deep ball to Mims that was gorgeous. I saw Russ take off and make smart yards with his legs, which he used to do all the time, but he even struggled with that last year. And I thought, hey, it looks like he's back a little bit. And then for some reason, I was just watching other games when Russ was doing all the Russ stuff to drag this offense down. And I saw it all this morning on rewatch, and I went, oh, that doesn't taste near as good this morning as it did when I watched it yesterday. There was a lot of, we talked about Jared Goff being in command, never looking out of phase, always looking poised. There was a lot of Russell Wilson doing the opposite. His eyes were coming down really fast. And look, the Commanders' defensive line is impressive, but there were multiple times where in fairly clean pockets, and this was a Russ knock even in Seattle, he looked up, didn't see what he liked, looked down, and started skittering around trying to run, which is very hard to pass protect for. So a lot of credit to his offensive line that it wasn't worse. But most of that stuff I sort of skated over yesterday. I just didn't see it. I was looking at another game when it happened this morning. It was all there as I focused on it, and I was like, oh, okay, there's progress. There's not as much as I would like to see. And yeah, there's still some skills there, but they don't come out consistently enough to really make a difference. I know Peyton's frustrated with a lot of plays that got left on the field. Got to give a shout out to Marvin Mims. Only the 2 catches, 113 yards, but also again on rewatch, I missed his 45-yard punt return yesterday live.
Which ended up again getting killed because of Russell later on the drive. So
I understand,
it's
but
frustrating.
It's really frustrating, but we really both liked Mims and thought he was in that solid second tier of really good receivers that wasn't necessarily going to get taken in the first round because of all the talent that was, more highly regarded. But we thought, there's a value. You're going to get that guy not in the first round, and he's got first round ability. We saw the big explosive stuff yesterday, but that's not all he can do. Yes, he can do that. And yes, we saw very clearly that he can burn people, but he's more complete than that already. And I think he's just going to continue to grow in this Broncos offense. And that's something to look forward to if you're a Denver fan. And then Brandon Johnson added the other explosives, 2 for 66 and 2 TDs. Brandon Johnson, not a name that gets bandied about very often. He had his day in the sun yesterday, and it was good. It's good for that offense. The Saints offense always had that guy, the second or third wide receiver that just sort of out of nowhere picked up 550 yards and 6 touchdowns in a season. And you're like, man, that guy's pretty good.
Yeah, the Kenny Stills of the world. Yeah.
Of the worlds. And there was a long line of them before that in New Orleans. So maybe Brandon Johnson's sort of morphing into that. Hey, we didn't really think about this guy receiver role that turns out to be very productive in Sean Payton's offense.
Maybe I didn't communicate it effectively. I want to try to get my point across that the Broncos are still an extremely frustratingly high variance team. Again, we want the explosives to happen. But the way in which they get those explosives, which they did, also leads to negative plays that then kill drives, right? And so it's very much an all or nothing team right now. When it's hitting and they're getting all of it, they go up 21-3. When it's not hitting and they're taking those 7 sacks, they let the team come back from being down 21-3. And you saw both of that in the same game. And again, I feel like if they're going to try to get explosives, they need to do it in a more quick hitting manner. Honestly, they need to study what Mike McDaniel's doing, where he's scheming up ways to get explosives with yards after catch. In addition to, super long developing deep balls off max protection, right? Like McDaniel in his way of like creating space and creating room for guys like, say, Marvin Mims to run, like the way that they use Tyreek and Waddle off motion to give them space to catch and run. Sean Payton should be doing that for Marvin Mims. As of right now, they're not, but that might be their key to getting those explosives that they need without giving Russ the opportunity to fuck it up by holding the ball for 5 seconds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And they also need to find their play. And McDaniel and Tua have their play. And the broadcast team did a very nice job, which they don't always do, but they did a great job last night of highlighting, hey, when they need a play, they're going to run this play. And they diagrammed it out really well. I don't feel like the Broncos and Peyton and Russ have their play right now, that when Russ starts to sort of get off kilter, when he starts to take some bad pressures, when his eyes start to drop, they can go back and go, Russ, we're going to run your play.
Yeah.
You know this like the back of your hand. It is so perfect. Like, just run this play. And it doesn't have to be, it's not for explosives. It can be, but it's really about settle them down, right? We say that, you know, coaches should scheme completions to settle down quarterbacks. And we're usually talking about young quarterbacks. Russ is not a young quarterback, but in some ways he's playing like one. You talked about that high variance. It's a roller coaster right now with him. It's these incredibly high difficulty throws that he's hitting, and then these incredibly easy ones that he's leaving on the field. And that leads to frustration. It feels like they kind of have to have a touchstone to come back to and go, hey, we're going to run the play. Everybody settle down. We're going to run the play right now, and then we're going to get back to it. Because Javonte Williams looks back from his injury. He was hammering away. All the pieces are there, or many of the pieces are there, but they're just not maximizing them right now, and that's leading to a lot of frustration.
Moving to our last game of the day, Giants-Cardinals. Again, we didn't talk a whole lot about the Giants last week. We talked mostly about the Cowboys, and we didn't talk about the Cardinals at all, I don't think. So consider this our mea culpa, talking about both teams. Although I guess if you're a Cardinals fan, you're going to skip this. Tale of two halves here. You know, obviously great first half for the Cardinals, terrible second half, terrible first half for the Giants, great second half. The one thing that I want to start off with is, oh my God, there's Brian Daboll. You know, we had a lot of frustration and questions about Brian Daboll in week one. Second week, he showed up and called himself a whale of a second half. And in particular, so that big throw to Jalen Hyatt, first play of third quarter. They came out, and again, it's 1st and 10, drive starter. They knew they wanted to take a shot. And they took their shot to Jalen Hyatt, and they hit it for a massive chunk of yards. It's what Daboll dialed up that really intrigued me, because he looked at the data and he looked at everything that the Cardinals were doing in the first half to bottle them up. They played quarters 70% of the time on first down in the first half. 70%. So he came out and he called up a post over with like a backside dagger as well, just in case they happen to be in cover three. That was kind of the read of like, you're seeing if that safety poaches the number 3 on the over, which then opens up the post. They're not going to be able to get the Hyatt in time. He's too fast. If they happen to be in cover 3 and they're covering Hyatt in the post, you go to the over. If the over is not there, you get the dig coming from the backside. That's going to be there. Like it was an absolutely beautiful play call, but it's literally designed to just gigafuck quarters, if you're calling that, into trips, right? Like if you are calling quarters where that weak side safety is poaching number 3 on the over, which they did, your corner is hosed because they got to run one-on-one with Jalen Hyatt from outside leverage. And it was the perfect play call. I absolutely loved it. And it was such a good way for Daboll to get Daniel Jones back into the game. Of like, hey, this is the look we think we're going to get. We're 70% sure we're going to get it. Literally 70%. We are trusting you to hit this. And he hit it. He hit it perfectly. And it got them going. It really did. Like once that ball got connected and, Hyatt's involved in the game. He had 2 big catches, but, Hyatt's involved in the game. It got us a big chunk when we needed a big chunk. We're down by 3 possessions. Like that one call, honestly, was what started that landslide moving. And from there, Danny heated up and he played a great second half. He really did. Pass protection still an issue. They had to kind of over-index on play action because it was the only way that they really could kind of slow down the Cardinals pass rush. 229 yards from Daniel Jones came off of play action, which was by far most in the NFL on Sunday. 71% of his yardage saw play action, but fuck it, it worked, right? He played well. The offense came back. They ended up winning the game, but just that one call from Dable made me remember why we think so highly of him to begin with. And it was phenomenal.
That was what threw us off so hard in week 1 is Dable called a masterful, I'm not even going to say season last year. Every game he kept that Giants team, which was wildly undermanned, in every game. That's why they made the playoffs. They had no business making the playoffs. It was Dable and his staff and Kafka and his guys as well, getting the most out of those players. And the absolute opposite of that happened in week 1. And we were like, what happened? How did the wheels fall off the bus? And honestly, for being completely, candid here, it looked that way again in the first half. And I got pretty worried. I was like, okay, this is when it's supposed to be correcting. And yes, Brian Dable caped up at halftime and came charging out of the phone booth and said, aha, I can still coach. Look at me. And, they end up taking the game, and that's impressive. But it's also, man, did they come out flat? And it started to look like, hey, the Giants are going to drop 2, but not only 2, they're going to drop their first 2, which you talked about, tanking playoff odds. And they're going to do it in like hilariously bad fashion. They got pantsed by the Cowboys on national TV. That sent their fans into an absolute spiral. Shout out to 5 Points Vids. Stay with it, buddy. Your team's coming back. But, it started to look that way. And look, if the Cardinals take this game in big fashion in week 2, it's very different than the Cowboys taking one from them in week 1. And Dable needed to make this pivot. He did. That was a play that really opened it up. And we've talked now 3 times in just this recap about the importance of passing explosives and getting a player that can open them up for you. The Ravens didn't have it. They went and got Zay. We talked about the Lions. We didn't talk about Jameson Williams because he's currently suspended, but he's going to add that element back into that offense when he comes back. Marvin Mims showed it for the Broncos, and they haven't, again, typically had that. We really thought, hey, Tim Patrick might be that guy. Judy hasn't been that guy. Tim Patrick, tragically gets hurt again. And Marvin Mims comes racing out of the locker room and picks up a couple, 100+ yards on 2 catches. Jalen Hyatt does the same thing. The Giants were grinding away. They couldn't buy a long pass last year. It was, Daniel Jones working underneath and running the ball and Saquon. And they go out and draft Jalen Hyatt and go, hey, we're going to open up defenses. We're going to make them respect the deep ball. That was purely why Jalen Hyatt was drafted. Comes out, pays it off yesterday, almost 90 yards on 2 catches. The big one that you talked about to open second half really turns the game around. Having that player for an offense doesn't have to be an alpha wide receiver, but you've got to have a legitimate speed threat that has to be respected, or else a 30-year game plan just goes away. That third over like 15 yards isn't really respected. Defense is like, yeah, but you can't throw it down there. So we're just going to do what we want to inside those first 2 zones and really make it hard on you. And if you can pull that knife out and go, nope, we've got one of these. We only have to hit it 2 or 3 times a game to make a huge difference in our outcome for winning. That player is a very important player, regardless of the team in the modern NFL.
On the Cardinals side of things, we all kind of we looked at that video that the Cardinals put out of the Gannon pep talk, and everybody universally was like, I don't know about this. Like this doesn't smell right. But I don't know what's going on in the building the rest of the time when the cameras are off, but those dudes are playing hard for him. They really are. And I want to credit the Cardinals for being outgunned in most games they're going to play in terms of talent, but they are scrapping their way through it. Josh Dobbs just showed up, and he's playing as well as you could possibly hope for.
Yep.
Dennis Gardeck is getting sacks all over the place.
Okay, you got 2 of my 4 for the game. Who are the other 2?
In terms of notes,
both of those guys are guys I was calling out for sure. Dobbs for putting together professional effort. Again, just having touchdown 2 weeks ago. He's doing as much as he can. And like Dobbs, I feel like at this point is pretty much a known. I don't feel like he's that guy that's just waiting for an opportunity to break out. Like he's going to do this. He's extremely smart. He's going to pick it up very quickly. He is going to play low risk football that's going to keep you in a game. You are not going to win because of his contributions, but doing all that on 2 weeks notice is incredibly impressive, and he deserves a lot of credit for it. Gardeck on the defensive side because he was a difference maker. I got 2 others. They're both on offense. I'll give you a clue.
I'm going to guess Ertz?
Nope.
Maybe? Who?
Nope.
Who's your
Connor.
other 2? Oh, yeah,
Connor,
James Conner.
James Conner had another one of those games. We talk about Tyler Lockett on the receiving side. Connor is this on the rushing side. Had another game that few people will recognize as great. Seems like the desert kind of makes people forget, contributions that happen. He racked up over 100 yards in a rushing TD, almost a 5-yard average too. This was not a 30 carries for a 100-yard effort. Like Connor was in there making gains, punishing people. Again, being something that I'm not going to say a rookie quarterback, a new quarterback, new to the system could lean on and go, hey, we need to turn around and hand it to Connor here because, he's going to get a gain and it's going to take a play of pass rush off me and we can come back and shoot forward again. He played that role really well last year, broke out with a bunch of touchdowns, which kind of made people take notice, but I feel like they've already gone back to sleep and forgotten about it. And the last one's rookie Michael Wilson. Provided some spark with a gaudy 18.7-yard average on 3 catches. Again, I just talked about this. Having the receiver that can threaten deep and get chunk plays doesn't have to be a ton of them, but the threat of it has to be real. And it looks like in the early going, Wilson is providing that for the Cardinals. That's a big deal for when they settle out their quarterback situation, whether it's Kyler coming back healthy or, moving on and getting their new passer. Like Wilson could figure into the mix if he can provide that, because they've struggled to get that even after trading for Hollywood Brown. And, Greg Dortch has looked good, but not done that consistently. If Wilson can be that guy, it can be a big part for their offense.
I also want to credit, how do I phrase this? I want to credit the Cardinals tackles while also admonishing the Giants edges, because they got dick in this game in terms of pressure. Yeah. Like Dexter Lawrence got 6, Leonard Williams got 4. The entire Giants edge rotation, like not just starters, but backups included. If I recall, actually, I put the note down here. Entire edge rotation combined for 3 pressures and 1 QB hit, which came from Kayvon. That's 4 guys with 3 pressures among all of them. Not good. Not good. No. So, and we know Kayvon's a good player. Like he's going to be fine, but the rest of the edge rotation needs to come to play.
Honestly, that's very Bears-like.
Yeah, like the one guy on the interior you can count on, and then all the edges just flailing about.
And I wouldn't even count on the guy in the interior necessarily. It's just, wow, they got enough pressures that I can count them on one hand, which is not enough for professional football teams. So yeah, a little bit of good for the Cardinals, a little bit of bad for the Giants. Things to work on.
The fact that honestly, like the Giants offense is the reason they won this game, which the wild swing from week 1 to week 2 there, where the offense couldn't do anything. And then you go up against an Arizona defense, which has played a lot tougher than I think people give him credit for. And to come out of a 20-point hole specifically because the Giants offense plays so well in the second half. I guess my overall message is I can't figure out what they are. These are 2 wildly different results against wildly different opponents, to be fair. If I look at the Giants' schedule, they're on Thursday night this week, aren't they? Oh God. They're
yes, they are.
They're at San Francisco. Oh no.
I saw the promo and it reminded me of we ended up doing the Giants preview late this summer because we did the East last, both NFC and AFC. And I remembered I had this flashback as the promo popped up yesterday for Thursday Night Football, because of course we do live streams on this channel. And I was thinking, all right, who do we have for TNF this week? Oh no. And I had this flash of you and I going through the schedule before we did the Giants thing and being like, wow, man, like they're going to have to come out of the gate kind of hot, because they got the Cowboys, they got the 49ers. Like we were like, they could really get behind the 8 ball. And yeah, they got a good second half to beat the Cardinals, which sounds like a backhanded bit of praise, but it's actual praise. Because again, like you said, the Cardinals and the Bucks didn't get the memo this year. They were supposed to be doormats, both of them. They're both like, what? Who, us? No, we're going to play tough games. But the Giants are going to go right into it on a short week against arguably one of the teams operating at the highest level in the NFL right now. And that's rough.
The Giants' next 5 games are against the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Commanders.
And we looked at that first half and thought, if they don't at least tread water, there is not going to be a second half for them. They're going to be in a hole big enough they can't get out of it.
If there was ever a time for Danny to earn 40+ million a year, it's right now, because oh my God, EJ, that might be the toughest 5-game stretch that anybody's got this year.
Yeah, that's murderer's row. There's no doubt about it. We say there's a werewolf every week, but some weeks you're hoping for a game. You're hoping to hit a team that's just not on its stride or super injured or maybe without their starting quarterback. You want a little bit of a break. It's an incredibly long season either way. If those games are relatively healthy opponents, yes, that is a murderous stretch.
Well, we'll see. We got 3 days till the TNF game. So, we'll go back and we'll watch even more film on the Giants defense, because I want to figure out what was going on with those edges to get ready for the 49ers. It should be an interesting game. I don't know. Is that the nicest possible way I could phrase this?
I'm going to give it an interesting first half. And if Dable stays on his play calling hot streak and keeps it really tight against Shanahan and the 49ers, it will be, I think, very impressive and a credit to him as a coach.
We'll see. I'm gonna have a couple extra bottles on standby for that one, just in case. Well, all right. That's a quick little dirty recap of everything that happened on Sunday. Again, we're recording this before the Monday night games. So if you want our opinion on the Monday night games, make sure to come to the Thursday night live stream, which is, again, going to be Giants 49ers. We'll be able to give you all of our thoughts on everything that happened tonight, as well as our Friday look ahead, where we're going to preview the 5 quote unquote best games of next Sunday in week 3. EJ, quick question. Did Homage sell out of the starter jackets yet?
Well, lucky for you, not completely.
Do I have one coming? Oh, is it a Texan starter?
I actually bought you the. Anyways, yes, I bought you a Texan starter. I was going to troll you and tell you all they had left was Colts, but no.
God.
The starter jackets are selling out. Yes, Teaser Brett has one on the way. Should be fantastic. But if you want one, you need to jump on homage.com and get one. They are starting to sell out pretty quickly. They do every year. They've got more inventory, but again, demand goes up every year. So I'm wearing my Commanders homage t-shirt today because it's comfy, and I wanted to give Sam Howell his props. He played a really good game. But if jackets aren't your thing, they've got a lot of other comfy team gear to carry you through the fall, including the Team Essentials collection, which has the primary team logos on not only these fabulously soft t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, they also have sweatpants. Who doesn't love sweatpants on a nice, cozy fall Sunday with the NFL on the TV? I don't know. If you don't like sweatpants watching the NFL, I'm not sure we can be friends.
That's exactly what I was wearing yesterday. Just
see? So if
it was like 72 degrees in California, and I'm like, football's on, it's still sweatpants weather. So,
if your sweats have holes in them, head to homage.com, get some of your team's fresh gear, use the code in the description, or I think we're having the QR code up on the screen. Either way, if you use that, help support the podcast.
We also want to thank our executive producers over on the EP Patreon tier there with Marat, Consti, Andrew, Liam, Connor, and Mike L. Thank you once again for supporting the show and helping us do our thing, boys. We'll be back in a few days for that TNF live stream, which we hope to God will be a good game. And then we got our Friday look ahead to week 3 if you want to come back for that. All right, EJ, let's get out of here and go back to work and get ready for that stream.